What's up? I'm Will, and I'm going to cover for loops today. Let's jump into it. For loops are one of the fundamental looping structures in JavaScript. They allow you to repeat statements until some condition is true. Let me show you the docs for this. We'll go to for. Mind you, I'm looking at a tool, but these are the MDN docs. So if you want to find this on the website, just go to Google, type in MDN, and then type for, and it'll probably be the first result. It'll look just like this. The way that a for loop works is you give it the for keyword, and then you're going to give it some optional statements. The first optional statement is an initializer. The initializer is just the starting point of the loop. Next, you're going to give it a conditional. If you recall my conditional video, it's the same concept. You're going to give it an expression that evaluates to a Boolean value, true or false. And the conditional is going to be the thing that determines when the loop exits. So the loop is going to continue to run until that conditional is true. In other words, as long as that condition is false, the loop is going to keep iterating. And the afterthought is simply a way to update the state in the variable that you initialized at the beginning of your for loop. Here is the syntax. Here we have for, parentheses, initialization, semicolon, condition, semicolon, afterthought. If you remember from my statements and expression video, you'll note that we can do multiple statements on a single line so long as we separate it by semicolons. You're seeing that in action here. After that, we can give it a statement to run. And the syntax here is showing the statement on a separate line, but that doesn't have to be the case. It could be on the same line. But for stylistic purposes, I actually do recommend you do this way. Let's do some examples. They have examples here, but we're going to do another example. I've been using my name for everything, so let's do that. We'll say const my name, and I'm going to put my name in here, William. Now what I want to do is just iterate across my name and print out each character individually. So we'll do for, and I'm going to create a initializer. So I'm going to say let ix. I'm going to initialize that to 0. Why 0? Well, because in JavaScript, and in fact most other programming languages, we start at 0 for the first element in a collection. A string is simply a collection of characters, so it's a collection. I'm going to give it a semicolon, and then I want to give the condition for when I want this loop to exit. So I want this loop to continue to run while ix is less than my name's length, like so. Now I can give it the afterthought. In this case, all I want to do is increment my ix value by 1. I just want to go to the next character, which is 1 over. So I'm going to do I plus equal 1. Now I know I haven't introduced the plus equal operator yet. For now, just understand that whenever I call plus equal 1, that's going to increment ix by 1. Now I'm going to do on a separate line. Even remember, this is optional. You could do it on the same line, and I'm going to prove that actually. Let's do that first. I'm going to do console log, and I'm going to go to my name, and I'm going to do something called index into it. The way that we index into a string is with square braces, and I'm going to tell it what element I want, like which item in that string do I want, and it's a number. So in this case, I'm just going to put ix, and what we'll see is if I run a little tool here, we're going to get WILLIAM all individually. Let me go ahead and put this on a separate line just to make this a little bit easier to read. This isn't the only thing that we can do. This initializer doesn't have to start at 0. In fact, it can start at any value you like. So let's reverse my name. What I can do is take this my name dot length, and I'm going to just copy that and place it here. Now, remember, lists and collections and arrays, which is what, we haven't gotten into that, but all of these things are 0 indexed. That means that we start at 0. Because we started at 0, we have to subtract 1. So technically we want n minus 1. That's what this is right here, is n minus 1. So I'm going to get my name.length minus 1. So my name is 7 characters. Let's see if it'll show it. No, maybe not. So my name is 7 characters. Oh, it does. And I need to make this 6. So I'm just going to subtract 1. Next, I need to have my condition. When do I want this loop to return? Well, I want this loop to return when it's equal to 0, or when it's, while it's greater than 0. So let's just do that. We'll say greater than 0. And I'm going to, instead of increment my my index, I'm going to decrement it by 1. And the way I can do that is by changing this from plus equal to minus equal. Now I get an off by 1 error. Well, the reason why I get an off by 1 error is because I also want to include 0. Remember, 0 is the first element in my list. So the way I'm going to fix that is put equal to. So now I get back my name in reverse. I'm not going to attempt to say that. I can't say that. Now let's see how we can use a loop to do interesting math. Let's say that I wanted to calculate the sum of numbers between a certain range. I can do that. Let's set that up right quick. I'm going to delete all of this and we'll say const A equals 3. Then we'll say const B equals 13. Now we can create a variable to hold our sum, and notice that I'm using let here. The reason why is because I need to update this sum on each iteration of the loop. So we'll do sum equal to 0. If you add 0 to any number, it is itself, so that's why I'm starting with 0 here. And now I'm going to create my loop. First things first is I'm going to set my index, and you can name this whatever you like. I'm using index or ix because it's easy for me to type. I'm going to set this equal to not 0, I'm going to set that equal to a, because that's the start of my range. And then I want this to continue to go until it's literally the same as b. So I'm going to do less than equal to b. And the reason why I'm doing that is that I want my sum to be inclusive. What does that mean? I want it to include 3 and 13. I don't want it to be just 3 and 12. Next, I'm going to do an increment value. In this case, I want to do every number between 3 and 13. So I just need to add 1. When I say number, I mean whole number. For all you math people, it's a whole number. So we're going to do plus equal 1. Now what I want to do is multiple statements. Now, if you recall in my expressions and statements video, you can have multiple statements so long as you used a block or curly braces. So we'll just put curly braces here. And I'm going to say sum plus equal ix. I'm using ix because, well, initially it's going to be 3 right here, right? So ix is going to be starting at 3. And ix is going to eventually end at 13. So every time I iterate across this loop, I'm going to get the next value. So it'll be 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on and so forth. So I now have my sum. I'm going to just write out console.log, and I'm going to write out my sum here. And I'm also going to write out ix here, just so we can see that this is going across all of these values. And we'll see here that this is currently not working, and that's because this is why it's very important to be very detailed oriented in your programs. This should be ix. So now it works. So now we see that the sum of all of the numbers between 3 and 13 is 88. Can we verify that? Let's see. 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8 plus 9 plus 10 plus 11 plus 12 plus 13. Do we get 88? We get 88. Seems to be correct. All right, so now if I want to do all of the numbers between, let's say 4 and 13, I get 85. Let's say I want 75, I get 2,844. I can add numbers now. Let's also go over one other thing that you could do with for loops. You could do something called an infinite loop. An infinite loop is just a loop that continues to run. It never ends. Now you may be wondering, why would you ever want that? Well, you may be familiar with video games. We tend to want our game loop to run forever until the game ends, until some action happens. We can do that with for loops as well. Let's do that. Let's first define a variable, and I'm going to have to do this using something called node. I will go over how to install that in a later video, but for now, just watch. You don't have to do this on your computer. It will crash your browser, just FYI, or it could crash your browser. So just keep that in mind. So we're going to say let I equal 0. The reason why I'm doing this is because I need to show you that it's actually counting forever. So I'm going to do something that's going to count. Next, I'm going to do for, and remember, the statements are optional. So I can give it empty statements. So for my initializer, I'm just going to give it an empty initializer, which is nothing. And for my condition, I'm just going to give it an empty condition, which is nothing. And because the afterthought is always optional, and because the afterthought is only required if you specify these other two, I can just leave that out. There's no need to put a semicolon. And we'll just do a little block right here, and we're going to do console log. Console log. And I'm going to do I++. This is another operator that I haven't discussed. It has side effects, so I only recommend you use it when you know what you're doing. But for most parts, I just say do I plus equal 1. In this case, I'm not assigning to anything, so I'm just going to do I plus plus. Now that I have my loop, let's run it and see what happens. Do node loop JS, and look at this. It's going to do this forever. It's just going to keep going. This is an infinite loop. So that's it for loops. If you have any questions, please drop a comment down below. And if you learned anything in this video, please give it a like.